Hi, welcome back to the Stable Block. I'm Ellie, and I make games about horses from my 1970s communist block apartment. Today, I'm updating the game's W8 gene expression, and Jenks and I are fixing up some useless dead space in our kitchen. Let's go. So what's W8? It's this lovely kit mutation found in a small family of Icelandic horses. Maybe a decade or so, I added W8 to the game as our very first fully dynamically generated kit gene. That means I was making the markings entirely with math, and not pre-drawing any of it by hand. Here's what W8 looked like before any updates. I don't think it's terrible, but I've gotten way better at mimicking real-life genes. I think I can get the game's version of W8 to match the real-life version a lot closer. The first step for me when simulating any real genes is a lot of research. I'm not a geneticist, but thankfully the amazing research done by actual scientists is normally available online for free. From what I can tell, W8 was first described in a paper called 7 Novel Kit Mutations in Horses with White Coat Color Phenotypes. W8 was caused by a spontaneous mutation in the mare Poncet vom Rosenhof, born in Germany in 2003. Neither her parents nor any of her siblings showed markings anything like this. When her kit gene was sequenced, it was found she had a mutation at the end of intron 15. Let's go to a new section I'm calling Pon Explains Genetics. Today, it's introns versus exons. What's the difference between an intron and an exon? Exons are the part of the gene that gets coded into RNA, and that RNA is used to make proteins. Let's pretend the exon section of kit is a recipe for cookies. While exons code for the actual protein, cookies in our example, introns are part of the gene's regulatory system. Introns say how much or how often to make a protein. The intron orders the cookies from the bakery. If normally functioning kit says something like, make 10 dozen cookies, the W8 intron mutation might be saying something like, stop after 5 dozen cookies. That's not enough cookies to go around. So once the cookies run out, the pigment cells start dying, resulting in white markings. That, of course, is way oversimplified. If you want a more in-depth take on this topic, I've included a link in the description to an excellent video by Beverly Biology that gets into the actual mechanisms of introns and exons. With that out of the way, let's get back to simulating W8. Unfortunately, because W8 is so new and found in so few horses, we've basically run out of things we can learn from scientific papers. Thankfully, the breeders of this mare not only bred her, but also have done a great job of documenting her W8 descendants. By checking out photos from their website and Facebook page, we can learn a fair bit about how W8 can express. After looking at lots of examples, here is how I would describe W8. When heterozygous, it has a range of expressions, from limited to roughly 50%. Now, there are some even louder individuals, but it's unclear to me if they have other mutations going on that are boosting their white levels. I'd say that's quite possible. The edge texture is very roan-like, one of the most roan-like W mutations I've ever seen. It has limited enough expression that individuals with 2 copies seem very possible, though there isn't any proof. There just aren't enough W8 horses in the world for that to have been tested yet. Now, a number of real-life W8 horses have blue eyes. I personally don't think it's W8 doing this. First, because kit mutations have never really shown much tendency to cause blues, and Icelandic lines are heavy with splash white mutations. Splash is notorious for causing blue eyes. I think the safer bet is to assume those blue-eyed W8s also have splash, at least for now. Now that I have a good idea of what I'm trying to mimic, let's take a look at W8 as it's found in the game right now. The first thing that grabs my attention is this weight map. These markings are all over the place and not concentrated on the extremities like they should be. So a new weight map is on my list. The shape of the markings are too round and it should be stretched vertically. But that will self-correct when I move this to the new kit generation matrix. The overall spottiness is great, so I'll just recreate that. But the edges are not even vaguely rony enough. We should be able to tackle all these without too many issues. I'm going to be using this horse called Rough Advice as my working model. My first order of business is to switch W8 generation from the old system to my new kit matrix. I test to see if the image loads, and it does, but of course with no kit markings because W8 isn't being called yet. I duplicate Sabino, relabel it as W8, and now rough advice looks like this. A straight mimic of Sabino. It's working, so now I just have to actually make it look like W8. Plugging in the old random W8 weight map gets me something that looks like this. You can see already that roundness has been fixed, and marking placement is not nearly as random as it was. That's because the new kit generation matrix has some built-in logic to help encourage white markings to be where they're supposed to be. It's still giving strange things like this white hawk though. Let's see if we can get that fixed. I spend the next several hours going back and forth, adjusting the variables in the code and adjusting the weight map. The map tells the generator where and when it's allowed to place a white marking, and the variables control what those markings look like. My first version was producing far too much white concentrated on the belly. That's a holdover from using Sabino 1 as my base. I changed this buckskin to a smoky black to help me see what I was doing more clearly. All the lacy markings are really making that weight map adjustment tough, so I tried larger spot sizes. That really isn't the look we want. It's giving belted cattle. I tweaked the weight map to include more white on the face, legs, and shoulders, but that belly white doesn't seem to want to budge. By this point, I was a few hours into back and forth fighting with the map and settings. In frustration, I just turned all the edge texture off so I could actually see what was going on. I made much better progress this way. After a few more rounds of tweaking, I was finally getting something I liked. Notice how the white markings are climbing the front of that hind leg now. That's a touch that really makes me happy. I turned the texture back on and made some final adjustments to it. The very last step was to get Roan working. Since I had already built Smart Roan functionality when I created Sabino 1, I mostly just had to flip a switch. With that heterozygous W8 was ready to go, and I was ready for a break. Speaking of breaks, it's time for some real-life interlude. Let's talk about the improvements Jenks and I have been making to our kitchen before we finish this gene up. Welcome to the dumbest spot in my kitchen. We have a huge section where this radiator sits that has no storage. It's been a catch-all for all my kitchen linens and the cast iron. Everything in here gets dirty and it's impossible to keep organized. Our plan is to build some heavy-duty shelves here so the iron and, of course, the pet brick has a home. Once I get it all clean, we can head off to the hardware store. Welcome to Monsieur Bricolage. Other hardware stores are available, but this one promises the stuff I need, has delivery, and I can get there easily on the bus. On the way inside, I got distracted by these fruit trees. Do I have any land to plant fruit trees? No, of course not. I live in a block apartment. But I have to take a look. It's gardener law. On the way to what I actually need, I got distracted again by these adorable mushroom pillows. Our front room is green and rust colored, so these were very tempting. I finally made it to what I was hunting for. Pre-made steel legs. These shelves are for cast iron, so the legs have got to be really strong. That's why I chose steel instead of wood. We grabbed 5 per shelf, 1 for each corner and 1 for the middle, and some leveling feet. Legs picked out, we made our way over to the countertops. These are extra thick and dense laminate. They are heat-proof and designed to hold heavy objects without sagging, so they should stand up to my collection of heavy metal cookware. Once everything was delivered, Jenks and I set to work, measuring, drilling, and screwing in the legs. We started with the larger high shelf. We got the first 4 legs on, and then figured out that middle placement, in situ. Of course, the building inspector had to come make sure we were doing it right. Thankfully, she's pretty easy to bribe. The second shelf was more of the same and fits underneath the first. We gave extra space between those shelves to make sure the big Dutch ovens were easy to take in and out. Here they are, all assembled and so much more usable. Not only do I no longer have to keep them on the floor, I no longer have to stack my cast iron, which was damaging the seasoning. Anyone who cooks with cast iron knows you don't mess with the seasoning. It's black gold and takes years to get a really good coat. Once we were finished, Jenks and I celebrated by making tortillas, because I'm a California girl and I will take any excuse for tacos. Kitchen interlude complete, let's get back to W8 and finish this gene up once and for all. Getting a new mutation in the KIT matrix to look right when heterozygous is just the first step in the process. The KIT matrix is a smart system that can blend multiple mutations together to create cohesive markings unique to each combination. So it's not just a matter of coding how homozygous W8 looks. I also have to test it against lots of other combinations to make sure it's combining how I want it to. We know that in real life, W8 can turn horses completely white, but game members have always been very vocal that they dislike the look of all white horses and don't want their blinds to look like that. It's always a difficult balance when updating genes already in the game to try and get them looking as realistic as possible without upending people's established breeding programs. At the end of the day, Horse Genetics Game has to be a game first and a genetics simulator second. With that in mind, I made sure that W8 maintains some color expression when homozygous and when combined with other KIT mutations. Let's check out some examples and see how it turned out. Here is a sampling of some homozygous W8 horses in the game. Remember, as far as I know, there are no real-life homozygous W8, so we just have to imagine what these might look like. Starting at the upper left, we have the most minimal expression, which still preserves a lot of colored areas along the hindquarters and torso of the horse. By the time we get to the lower right, almost all color is gone, though some speckles remain on the top line. Now, something I know is not realistic in this generation is the lack of roaning. W8 should have a lot more roan expression, but in the interest of not changing people's existing horses too much, I made the roaning optional. It's, again, walking that balance between this being a game versus a genetic simulator. Here are two images side by side of the same horse. They just have different image seeds. One is roany and one's without roan. The roan side is much more accurate, but I'll leave it up to members to decide which look they want to go for their lines. I made sure W8 worked correctly when combined with other KIT matrix genes like Sabina1 pictured here. Here's an example combined with W29. You can see how much variation expression the KIT matrix can generate. Combinations working great, W8 is finished, and it's ready to go live in the game. I would love to hear your feedback on these changes. Are you more likely to use W8 with your herd now that it looks more realistic, or are you a hardcore old W8 stan? If you're neutral either way, you can still drop a horsey emoji in the comments to ensure good luck next breeding season. If you watched this whole video and are not a member yet, what are you waiting for? You clearly love horse genetics. HGG is always free to join, never pay to win, and a low drama community of adult players. I hope to see you in the game. Until next time, bye-bye from the block.